So today we're going to be discussing how close we actually are to World War III. Now, as of lately, tensions in the world have been greatly rising, and this is due to a multitude of factors. But today we're going to be breaking down those factors and seeing what causes could actually lead us up into another global conflict, and what causes are less serious and things we should probably brush aside. Well, not brush aside, but things that we should, take note of, but know that it's not going to lead into a global conflict. At least I hope. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. That really helps us out as we are reaching out to 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Recently, we just hit 75,000 subscribers, and that means we are 3/4 of the way there. And that only leaves 25,000. Now, I say only. With our growth, that isn't too far away. And honestly, we can probably hit it within the next couple of months. Maybe not by the end of this year, but by the beginning of next year. Even then, that's okay, but we are aiming for it by the end of this year. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into this video. Now, obviously, the most likely scenario where a world war breaks out is between Russia and NATO. Now, as we know of this year, Russia has invaded Ukraine and since has done a lot of things which have escalated tensions. Now, of course, a war is a full-on tension break, but Russia has done some things which has the rest of the world looking at it kind of funny, such as saying that we might use nuclear bombs, the annexation of 4 regions in Ukraine, and a bunch of civilian things which I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about. But nonetheless, Russia's been doing some war crimey things in Ukraine, and in response, the West has done some things such as supplying Ukraine, and in response to that, Russia has, well, they threatened nukes again. And in response to that, the West has said, don't do that or we will destroy you. Literally. So, it's a fun thing between Russia and Europe. But let's break down how this could actually lead into a world war and how close we are to said conflict if it does break out. Now, as of recording this, the most recent break in tensions was Russia doing 80 different missile strikes across Ukraine, 3 of which crossed over into Moldovan airspace. That is having its own consequences right now. But, yeah, those hit mostly civilian things, so that's not good on Russia's part. In response to that, countries like Germany and the United States have begun to supply Ukraine with air defense systems. Now, this in a way could lead into a global conflict, not from the supplying of Ukraine, but from the missile launches. And I have to say, it's probably the least likely scenario to play into a world war. So they launched it from the Black Sea, which is technically international waters, but I'm pretty sure it was over here. So Russian occupied Ukrainian waters. Whatever, but still, they launched the missiles and they flew over Moldovan airspace. I can't pinpoint the exact location, but it went something like that, and there was 3 entry points, I think. But if that was a NATO member, such as Romania, and the missiles went like this, that would technically be able to activate Article 5, which we all know what that does. And if you don't know what it does, basically NATO versus Russia. And in another recent event, we had the Crimean bridge being partially collapsed. Now, this bridge is right around there, and it itself is a violation of international law. If you disagree with me, then you're wrong. But also because, Russia is occupying Crimea, most of the world doesn't recognize that. Them building the bridge between Ukraine and Crimea and their territory is a violation of Ukraine's territory. But that's not the important part. The important part is that this happened on Putin's birthday. So that's a nice 70th birthday gift, I guess. And second of all, it's kind of debatable what the response will be. Putin himself has said that this is a terrorist attack, which is kind of ironic. Yeah, it could have been done by the Russians in order to justify use of some kind of weapon against Ukraine, or it's probably done by Ukraine. It could have also been done by the West, but that's extremely unlikely because that would have been detected. I don't think any of their current weapons, like the HIMARS, I don't think they could reach that far. So it could have been a naval ship, but I don't think they have that capability. So it's kind of questionable how exactly this happened. They still don't know. Some people are saying like a truck bomb, some are saying it was a direct hit. We don't know. But this could justify Putin's use of nuclear bombs in Ukraine. We'll get into that here in a second. So that's another scenario in which this war could lead into a ginormous war. In our third way, a world war could start. Now, this is also extremely unlikely to escalate into a world conflict, but Belarus's involvement in the Ukrainian war. As we know, Belarus is in a dictatorship state. They have had the same leader since 1997, I think. And then Russia's history has been mostly Putin. There's been some other guys, but, give or take, it's mostly been Putin. And yeah, so it's unlikely, but it's still possible. So Russia and Belarus have done joint deployment, which basically means that Russian troops and Belarusian troops are now on the southern border of Belarus to protect themselves from Ukraine, because we all know Ukraine's going to invade Belarus, obviously. Who doesn't know that, right, guys? But some people are saying that this is just them getting ready to invade Ukraine from the north, and it's likely, even though they denied it, but we can't trust them because, once again, the whole dictator thing. But as we can see, Belarus is close to Poland and Lithuania, as well as Latvia, And something to note about these three guys is they're all in NATO. So if something were to happen over here in this particular area where someone did something and someone gets shot, that's an Article 5 thing, and yep, there's a conflict. So now going back to the nuclear bombs thing, if Russia uses nuclear bombs in Ukraine, that is the end of Russia, and I say that in quotes because someone said something similar to that. There are four main options. I think, if I remember correctly, there are four options that the West has if Russia uses nukes in Ukraine, and all of them involve them getting involved. So no matter what, if Russia uses nukes, that is going to lead into a conflict around the world, or most notably from Europe and Russia. It could lead into other countries, but I'm honestly starting to think that China is smarter than that, and they might not get involved in a war like this, which would mean that it would just be NATO versus Russia, which sort of qualifies as a global conflict, but at the same time, I don't know, the terminology is weird. But yeah, nuclear bombs, NATO involvement. One way that NATO would do this is if they would destroy Russian forces in Ukraine, and that is mostly just done by missiles being dropped on the troops. Yep, that's kind of terrifying, but that's just war for you. I think another response would be creating a no-fly zone over Ukraine. So NATO, the Air Force of NATO in the United States, basically just covering Ukraine and shooting down any jets that enter to the airspace. Third option, I think, is striking the military across Russia and destroying the military infrastructure. That's a pretty violent response. And the fourth, I think, is just getting involved and, basically giving Russia an ultimatum saying, get out of Ukraine or we're going to go into Ukraine and kick you out ourselves. Now, of course, that's all of those options are going to lead into Russia declaring war on NATO. And that's unfortunate, but that is just what's going to happen if Putin does use nukes. And the likelihood of that is slowly increasing, but we can't take him too seriously. He is kind of deranged, so it's not, no one can take him seriously. But yeah, that is the Ukrainian NATO part of this possible escalation. Now, like I said, there's been a factor of really high tension raising events that have happened recently, and I don't know, it's just getting worse and worse, and the outlook isn't looking too good. Anyway, time for our NATO segment, where we talk about NATO for a brief second. So all NATO members, except for Hungary and Turkey, have fully ratified Finland and Sweden's accession into the alliance. Now, why hasn't Hungary and Turkey done this? Because they're Hungary and Turkey. There's no other explanation. Hungary, because they are ruled by a dictator-ish kind of guy. Orban, he's not a good person. I think Hungary has recently moved into a semi-democracy column, and that's kind of not good for them because they got a bunch of EU funds cut from them. And believe it or not, Poland voted in favor of cutting fundings for Hungary, so ouch. But nonetheless, they have no date for planned ratification of Finland and Sweden. And then Turkey, we already know that they have been a problem for Finland and Sweden. I know they made a deal with the two countries, and so far I do believe that Sweden has been following up with those deal processes, but then recently Turkey threatened to not ratify them, so it's interesting. It's a weird game, I guess. But that is the ratification process. Speaking of the ratification process, Ukraine recently applied to join NATO. I have no confidence in them joining while this war is ongoing, and I also don't have much confidence for them joining after this war. Of course, most NATO members support Ukraine here, and they've either had their hand forced in that or just because a majority of NATO just supports Ukraine. But them actually getting ratified by everyone is extremely unlikely. I think a total of 7 or 9 countries have said they would ratify, and that's a third of the alliance. So when thinking about that, that's actually kind of scary, but I don't think it's possible for the other 20 members to ratify them. We're a little bit smarter than that while the Russia war is ongoing. Maybe when it's over, it will change, but currently, no. So that's going to end our NATO segment. Now let's go ahead and jump over into the Pacific, where we had things stirring with China and Taiwan, as well as North Korea, because we have to talk about North Korea. So let's start off with North Korea, because that's the most recent of escalations. Recently, North Korea fired a missile which flew over this part of Japan. Don't remember. I think it starts with an H. Hokkaido? I don't remember where that is even. I suck at geography. Here I am, a mapping/geography YouTuber, and I can't even pinpoint that place on a map. Okay, well, I can't find the name online for some reason because I can't spell anything right. But they flew a missile over Japan nonetheless. It landed in the ocean either over here. Well, no, it would have to be over here because it went over Japan. But this prompted EOS alerts in Japan. It told people to take shelter, and overall, it caused a big mess for Japan. And in response to that, the US, South Korea, and Japan held naval operations all over and near North Korea So that's kind of how we diplomatically solve this issue. We just show force. It's like two dogs barking at each other. Have you guys ever seen the video of the two dogs barking and then they open the gate and then the dogs, they don't do anything? It's kind of like what's happening over here, except with nukes and bombs. But yeah, that is a not so good thing for Japan, because that means North Korea isn't necessarily afraid. Well, they're afraid. They're 100% afraid. They know the capabilities of the US and their allies, but they aren't afraid to test the waters. Pun intended. We've also seen some people saying some not so nice stuff about this whole border thing right here, and overall it's just Korea being Korea again. But now we zoom out a little bit more for a larger problem: China and Taiwan. So accordingly and reportedly, China is preparing to take Taiwan by 2027. This is scary for two reasons. One, because that is going to lead into a global conflict, and two, because Russia didn't prepare for Ukraine, whereas China is actually preparing for Taiwan, meaning they're actually going to be probably capable of taking the island. Now, let's go over option one there, global conflict. So China has once again said that Taiwan is a part of them. They've been doing this for years now, and well, actually not years, because this only started becoming a problem again recently. But basically they're saying this is China, and this is saying we are not China, although they are China, the Republic of China. But this is independent, and no one agrees with that because they like trading with China. But deep down, everyone knows Taiwan is a country, right? So the tensions wise, China has been doing a lot of bad things, such as flying planes over the island and back, putting a lot of drills all around Taiwan, which are not very fun if you are Taiwan. This comes after Nancy Pelosi visited the island a couple weeks, was it months or weeks ago? It was a while ago. Time is flying by in the end of this year. It's already October 11th. It's in a month and a half. How do you feel about that? No, it's in 2 months. Wait, it's in 2 months. Yeah. 2 months in a couple of days. Anyway, aside from my bad math, China has been doing all those things, and Taiwan recently made a statement saying any incursions into our airspace will result in a declaration of, hey, you invaded me. Basically saying that if China flies planes into there, it is an act of war and Taiwan will respond, which is kind of funny, seeing as Taiwan is kind of small compared to this. I don't know how much damage they would do, but we'll just assume that they're going to start shooting things down and intercepting jets with actual live fire. And I, without a doubt, believe that China would not let that slide, so they're gonna probably invade Taiwan. And as we know, Joe Biden has said that if China invades Taiwan, the United States troops will be involved. If that is actually true, we don't know, because there's different opinions going around, or different sayings, I should say. Like, I think the actual government said that the policy on Taiwan has not changed, but then again, we don't know the policy on Taiwan because there's a lot of things being held secret about the whole US-Taiwan alliance. But I'm going to take his word for it, which I don't know if I should take his word for it. But if the US does get involved, that is going to trigger a whole East Asia war. Without a doubt, North Korea and South Korea, as well as Japan, would get involved, maybe even the Philippines, possibly Vietnam and Australia and New Zealand, of course. We would have the UK getting involved in that because of the whole Kanzuk thing. And we might even see India get involved. Now, that's unlikely because India is kind of going on their own route right now. They hate China, they hate Pakistan, but I don't know if they're willing to go to war over it. Indians, let me know in the comments if this were to happen and China invaded Taiwan and the US got involved along with these guys. Do you think your country would get involved? It's kind of a weird scenario as well because of Pakistan, who is an ally of China, but they also do cooperation with the United States. So if they join on China's side, that would be a violation of a lot of things the US has with Pakistan. I'm pretty sure they also have military bases in Pakistan. So yeah, that's war. That's war. And for our last chapter in this video, we head over to the most violent area in the world, the Middle East / Central Asia. Is it actually the most violent? Probably, but don't cite me on that. I just made that up. I don't know if that's actually true. Probably not true. Hopefully it's not offensive to say that. I don't know anymore. But where do we even start? There's so much to jump into here. I guess we'll go from top to bottom. So Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is kind of going off the whole World War III thing. These are the conflicts that I talked about in the beginning that have little to no chance of evolving into a world conflict. So recently, Azerbaijan attacked Armenia, and in response to that, Armenia has signaled a call for help because this would technically activate CSTO, which is the Russian-like NATO alliance. Contenders in that alliance include Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and of course Armenia. And the problem with that is that Armenia tried to activate the alliance and a total of 0 countries came to the aid of Armenia. Why is that, you might ask? Because Russia can't do anything about it because they are focused on trying to invade Ukraine, and everyone else doesn't even have that close of a military. Kazakhstan's military wouldn't be able to really assist here. Belarus is landlocked in Europe, so they can't do anything. So upon seeing that their allies aren't in fact allies, Armenia has said that they will withdraw from CSTO if Russia does not respond by February of 23. And if by then they don't respond, then they will be forced to go to the opposing team, aka the United States. I think there was a quote online from the Armenian foreign minister who said, if we can't rely on the CSTO, and we can't rely on the EU, which was kind of throwing shade at Europe for some reason. I don't know the whole story behind that. I'm assuming it has something to do with Armenia trying to join the EU and they got denied or something. He later went on to say that Armenia will be forced to work with America, who seems like the only gleaming beam of hope they have left. Do your own research. Don't take my word on this topic in particular. Everything else, I know what I'm talking about. But I sound really dumb right now. Basically, I researched everything for the Ukraine, Russia, and China, Taiwan, North Korea, Japan thing. Kind of going off in the dark over here, but this is just based on information that I read a while ago. So if you think something I said is wrong, just go look it up yourself. Let me know in the comments if it is wrong. But so far, I have read into this, and Armenia did say that, according to sources. So yeah, Armenia becoming a US ally is weird because the US relies on Azerbaijan for like natural gas and oil. So them becoming an ally with Armenia would hurt that tension. But okay, I didn't talk about the Nord Stream yet, did I? We'll get to that in a second, maybe. So yeah, Armenia becoming unaligned temporarily, or maybe permanently. Let's jump over to Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, where a couple weeks ago there were some border skirmishes and a lot of people died. I don't know if that's ongoing because Armenia does not care about this for some reason. Probably because it's been ongoing. I do want to talk about that for a second. But yeah, there's been skirmishes over here, nothing particularly new. But let's go ahead and check out Iran, who's been having a lot of unrest recently over the killing of a young adult female because she wasn't wearing a hijab. If you don't know, in Iran there is a dictatorship and it's very strict on religion over here. So if you don't follow what the government says or you do something that's against the religion, you have a pretty high chance of dying. We've seen gay people get executed. We've seen obviously women get beat to death because they aren't wearing a hijab, and a multitude of other human rights violations by the Iranian government. And this is the most recent one, and this one has had the greatest effect across Iran, as a majority of, if not all of the cities in Iran are seeing protesters erupt, and they're demanding freedom, basically. They're demanding that the government dictator is put aside, if you know what I mean. They're also demanding that these religious bound laws that are infringing on rights are removed. We've seen lots of people protest by just like not wearing a hijab, which police have responded with violently because that's what they're told to do. So yeah, Iran, unrest isn't going to lead into anything. Probably not. This will probably die down in a few weeks. But if it doesn't and it leads into a revolution or a coup, I am in full support of that because this is a really screwed up scenario. But anyway, we head on down to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who have cut oil production for the United States. Now, we all know that the United States love oil, and you know, the whole Iraq thing, completely unjustified war. It was just for oil. If you don't believe that or know that, then that is the most likely truth why we invaded Iraq. I mean, Afghanistan, it was sort of justified for like the first year, and then it was just occupation and bloating the resources and stuff. But let's not talk about the past US no-nos. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So like I said, they voted to cut production for the United States, and in response to that, the United States has said that, hey, you just did something you don't want to do, and we're gonna reevaluate our relations with you. That is quite literally what the president said. Saudi Arabia has been an interesting country in like discussion with its relation with the United States. It's kind of rough. We all know the whole human rights violations, or that's Iran. It's like, I don't know, it's inequality and a lot of stuff that Saudi Arabia does that the United States doesn't like support, but they still kind of look away from it because they need the oil. But nonetheless, the United States has said, hey, we're gonna like maybe not be your ally anymore, and this could lead into like a withdrawal of all American troops from the countries, which would not be good because they would have to get protection from someone else, and that someone else would most likely be Russia, who is, they're not the strongest country. Now, we've learned that this year. So yeah, withdrawing American troops from Saudi Arabia and the UAE is not ideal for the two countries. That's just a world news topic. Once again, these couple things with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, and Armenia and Azerbaijan, these won't lead into world conflicts most likely. It's just general news coverage. Oh, and then of course something happened over here, but we don't really, I mean, something is always happening over here. So two more things. The Nord Stream, those got blown up by remote explosives. I usually don't like to buy into conspiracy theories and kind of stuff like that. Obviously you shouldn't buy into those kind of things because there's no factual evidence. But it is you know, the blame for this is being put on Russia, which is fair, you know, I mean, but when you think about it, that doesn't make much sense because this is how they're getting money. They're supplying Europe with gas, and some people are saying the United States did this, and honestly, that's totally likely. America has done things like this in the past where it's just like, I don't know, they just get away with it, and everyone brushes to the side. Once again, read into this yourself. Don't go off of my word on this. It is best to inform yourself with your own information, and make sure to use reliable sources as well. This is just what I've gathered from it, and that's my own formed opinion on it. It is still entirely likely that Russia did this, and it's also probably more likely that Russia did this, as the Russian Navy was in this area when it blew up. So, I don't know. It's an interesting topic. Look into it. You probably won't find... I don't know. It's just... media is weird. Speaking of media, I know a lot of people, and I'm going off branch and off topic here, but I know a lot of people say that Western media isn't fair because it's only covering Ukraine, and it's not covering Israel and Palestine, or it's not covering over Iran, or it's not covering over Armenia and Azerbaijan. And that is true. And the Western media is, in a way, biased towards other Western countries, which, if you really think about it, that makes sense. Why would you want to cover something that happened in South Sudan? Because they're not a Western country, and it doesn't have an impact on Western countries. Whereas the Ukraine thing is most certainly having an impact on Western countries as taxpayer money. And I don't mean this in like a conservative way, like our tax money is going overseas. I'm just meaning it like in a literal and intellectual way, that our taxpayer money is being used to support Ukraine. And honestly, I'm fine with that. I mean, I know it's a good cause. In my opinion, it's a good cause. Your opinion might be different, but either way, we are funding the US's protection of Ukraine, and that does concern us because it's our money, it's our country sending equipment over to them, and so on and so forth. But the reason this is getting so much more coverage, in my opinion, is because, like I said, it's more impactful for us. It's also a brand new conflict. This just happened in February of this year. Whereas if we go down to Israel and Palestine, this has been happening for years and years since the creation of the two countries. And I know that it's kind of hypocritical in some ways. It's been happening forever. That does not mean that we ignore all the horrible things that Israel has done to Palestine and the horrible things that Palestine has done in retaliation to that. But yeah, this has been ongoing forever. That doesn't mean we should ignore it, but it does kind of explain why we're getting more attention from this as opposed to this. Same thing with Armenia and Azerbaijan. 90% of Americans won't be able to even point to these two countries on a map, let alone know what they are. Once again, that doesn't mean we should completely ignore it. These are important things. When important events like this happen, where there's like attacks on civilians and stuff, that 100% should be reported on, because people need to know about these things that are happening in other countries in the world. And it's just better to be aware about what's happening in the world as opposed to only knowing what's happening in Western countries. But if it doesn't necessarily concern your country, then that kind of levies into another thing. But overall, this has been happening for years and decades, and honestly, I feel like there's always been problems with this particular region of the world, Turkey. And then finally, ending off with Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. I don't even know much about it because I can't find any sources on it. That's how blocked up it is. Once again, this does not concern us because this is in the middle of Asia. That doesn't mean we should ignore it completely, but it just doesn't concern us, so that's probably why Western media outlets aren't like reporting on it. And once again, there is a 100% bias towards Ukraine. I'm not going to deny that, but there's just my take on it. Same thing with China and Taiwan. You know, we always see articles around Taiwan. Taiwan is linked to the United States, which is like the supplier of Western media. And we all know that this could stem into a world conflict. This could step into a world conflict, whereas these countries are unlikely to stem into a world conflict. So that's just my hot take. Can't wait to get bombarded for an opinion, but whatever. If you have watched this far, and I am 34 minutes into recording, which means I will actually be able to get this done in a reasonable amount of time. I had a big procrastination issue today and yesterday coming into recording because I just wasn't in the mood for recording. I've been like really, I don't want to say depressed, but like tired and anxious and stressed, which are all symptoms of depression. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, I've been busy to the point where I'm procrastinating in my free time, which just makes me lazy and leads into unproductiveness. So I'm recording this today before you see it. It is currently 6 o'clock. I have to get this done by 10 o'clock, and then, you know, all that fun YouTube stuff. But once again, if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. This video is really fun to make because it talks about things that I'm really interested in. So, you know, mapping, I'm interested in that, but like geopolitics, that's a whole other level of interest. I would love to do more stuff like this in the future, but that is dependent on you and your support for this video. So if you do like it, make sure to leave a like on it, share the video with anyone who wants to get caught up with what's happening in the world, and subscribe to the channel, the most important thing, because once again, we are reaching for 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. 100K is down the road. We can see it. We just got to get there, and we got to get there within 2 months. Is it possible? Yes, anything is possible, but it's unlikely. So let's get that likelihood up. For the final time, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.